Hi, my name's Paul Waring and I'm stood here in Mission Gallery in Swansea with my solo exhibition Flux and Poise. The exhibition has been on tour around Wales to 4 galleries. It opened at Ruthin Craft Centre last May, then moved to Llantarnam Grange Arts Centre, then Aberystwyth Arts Centre, and finally here at Mission Gallery Swansea. The exhibition came from an Arts Council of Wales funded project. The project was called Material Matters and basically gave me time out to produce this new body of work that's related to the work that I'd done prior to that for previous 10 years, but has changed in quite significant ways. I started the project in July 2019 with a month at Aberystwyth Arts Centre. I rented one of the studios there, and although I didn't work with clay for the month, I did a lot of drawing, photography, and a lot of walking of the Ceredigion coast, the mountains and the natural area around the coastland. Basically, I wanted to see how the different environment from the built environment where I am in Cardiff, how the more natural, rugged coastal region could influence the work that I'd been making. Some of the drawings I did from the residency at Aberystwyth are on the wall over here. The centrepiece shows a drawing of 5 different objects. This was a fantasy journey in my head, and I hadn't really sort of thought about what the project was going to reveal, but this projected journey was kind of, looking at the objects that I was making at the time, which were very symmetrical, very orderly in form, and then gradually becoming asymmetrical. So in my head I had the idea of asymmetry as a change that I wanted to introduce to the work. This became more evident from walking the coastline and looking at the mountains. I suppose basically the change in dominant form from the right angles of the built environment to the diagonals and the slopes and the dips and the drops, and the more natural angles of the urban environment and the coastal region. Some of the early work when I returned to Cardiff in September 2019 were these pieces here amongst others. So these pieces were made very early on. They relate to the ellipses that I was making, which again were very orderly, symmetrical, but I wanted to extend them in some way to draw out asymmetry from the angle that was upright. So this was the historical angle, and this was the new direction that the piece was going to go in. The glaze is quite significantly different on these pieces as well. Previously I'd been working with quite sort of painterly brush marks, sort of almost abstracted landscape. So I would have almost horizon lines, skylines, brush marks and chemical reactions that would allude to land and landscape, but abstracted. I think the sense of disruption that glaze can bring, and certainly the materials that I use, will disrupt the surface. So for me, that's still a very key part of the work, is that disrupted surface through chemical reactions in the glaze materials. But returning to the form, changes in form kind of developed. I mean, I moved on from the extend ellipses to something a bit more dramatic with the twist ellipse. These are very tricky to make, as you can possibly see underneath. They sit on a small foot, which then rises to the other side, and then the rim undulates. So this for me was about trying to get towards that sense of movement through the landscape, and the physical sense and the emotional sense of being in the landscape that I was experiencing in Aberystwyth. I made a pair of these, one survived, and they were so tricky to make. I was a bit like, I'm not really sure I want to continue with them. They were an interesting experiment. At the same time as these, the first lockdown in 2020 happened. So I moved bags of clay and my banding wheel home, and then set about to make a series of small pieces and with a material that I hadn't used before called porcelain. All the previous work and all these more sculptural pieces are made with a grogged stoneware. So it's much better for hand building. I'd never used porcelain before. I'd heard that it was a notoriously difficult material to use, but I thought, let's give it a go. I particularly wanted to see how the opaque, crusty, visceral glazes I've been using would work on that white, potentially translucent body, whether there would be a sense of translucency with the porcelain and those glazes or not. Early tests revealed that there could be. You would get that interaction of light and opacity. But I moved on from the use of porcelain with translucency in the end to reveal, just working with it as a material that I really enjoyed the density of. So I made these, what started off as test pieces for the glaze. As I say, bearing in mind that these were made in lockdown, the idea that touch was a mediated and quite a difficult experience at the time. These pieces being made of porcelain, what I love the density of it, but I also love the fact that you can polish the bottom and you end up with a sensory experience which contrasts really well against the rough, dry, volcanic glaze. The underside of these intimate pieces are really smooth, so they provide, well, for me at the time, and still, there's a real sense of intimacy and comfort that I really enjoy. And you don't get that from the other work. Obviously, they're much bigger, but they're more about the sort of the sculptural presence, whereas these, I think the small porcelain pieces really invite touch. I did go on to make much larger pieces in porcelain later on, but before that, if we return to the tilt ellipses, I wanted a simplified form. So rather than them twisting and moving in all sorts of directions, I thought to simplify it, I returned to the ellipse, but I put it on an angle. So they relate very clearly to their predecessors, but because of the tilt angle, they have, I'm trying to bring that sense of movement and drama into the work. The surfaces have developed as well. This pairing here, this was the last piece or pairing I made before the exhibition opened at Ruthin. Now most of the work has taken 1 or 2 glaze firings. These took 4. So there were basically 3 attempts at something that I wasn't happy with. And on the 4th one, the pieces finally said, yeah, we're ready. And I look at them, and I think when I got them out of the kiln, all I felt was the struggle. And I wasn't really happy about them, but I put them into the exhibition. But being given time and then to see them again now, I'm like, really intrigued in that process of refiring, reglazing, working with the materials in partnership so that eventually they will reveal what they want and what they can. I think these represent and reveal the struggle that I had with them, and possibly the struggle of the whole project, of that creating a whole new body of work. It's a really interesting process, but it's not without pressure and worry and stress, because you've got to put on an exhibition at the end of it, and you've got to be happy with the work and the creation that you're going through. So I think for me, this pair, this is probably when I decided the name of the exhibition was Flux and Poise, because I think for me they kind of epitomise that. The surfaces are so deep. For me, they hold meaning, and there's a lot of flux in there. There's a lot of texture. There's everything I've been working with. From a distance, at a quick glance, they just look murky and black. But you look close, and you see all the different colours within that black. And you see the different textures. You see where certain glazes have run. So that's where the fluxing has gone on, where you get flashes of lighter colour, the rougher volcanic areas. I'm really happy with those.